Welcome to Mind Set in Stone podcasts, where we dive deep into the most compelling books on the shelf. Join hosts Dave and Poppy as they uncover the stories, themes, and ideas that shape our understanding and inspire curiosity. Get ready to explore the big ideas that leave a lasting impact. Let's get started.
All right, let's dive into the world of Roman emperors and Stoic wisdom. Today, we're cracking open Meditations, the personal journal of Marcus Aurelius.
Now, you might be thinking, a journal from almost 2,000 years ago? What's that got to do with me?
Right. What could that possibly have to say to us today?
Well, get ready to be surprised because Meditations isn't your typical dusty history book.
Oh.
It's full of timeless wisdom that's just as relevant now as it was back then, believe it or not.
I am intrigued. So, to kick things off, what exactly is Meditations?
That's a great question. Unlike your typical philosophical treatise, Meditations wasn't written for an audience.
So it wasn't meant to be a big public thing.
Exactly. It's a collection of personal thoughts, reflections, almost like notes to himself.
Oh, so we're getting a really intimate look into his mind.
You got it. And the best part is it's unfiltered. No PR team, no spin doctors, just Marcus Aurelius being real with himself.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. We're talking about one of history's most powerful men, an emperor, and we get to see his raw, unedited thoughts.
It's a rare glimpse into the mind of a leader grappling with power, duty, and the meaning of life.
Okay, I'm hooked. We've got excerpts from Meditations itself and an introduction to help us understand the context. But first, who was this guy? Marcus Aurelius.
Well, he was born into a prominent Roman family, basically destined for a life in politics.
Sounds like a pretty privileged upbringing.
It was. But his path took an unexpected turn when he was adopted by Emperor Antoninus Pius, which basically put him next in line for the throne.
Wow, talk about a life-changing event.
He ended up ruling the Roman Empire for almost 2 decades, from 161 to 180 AD.
That's a pretty long reign. What was it like ruling back then?
Imagine constant wars, plagues, political turmoil. It was a wild time.
Sounds like a pretty stressful job, leading an empire during such a crazy period.
Absolutely. But in the middle of all this chaos, he found peace and direction in Stoic philosophy.
Ah, Stoicism. We hear that word a lot these days. What's the deal with Stoicism?
Well, imagine the universe as a perfectly functioning machine with every piece playing its part. That's how the Stoics saw things.
I think I get it. So everything has its place, even the tough stuff.
Exactly. They believed in this guiding force, the logos, this universal reason that ensured that everything had a purpose, even the things we might see as bad, like war or hardship.
So instead of asking, why is this happening to me, Stoicism suggests accepting that even tough times are part of a bigger universal plan.
You got it. And this might sound passive, but it's actually about taking control.
Oh, how so?
Stoics believed that real happiness, true joy, doesn't come from what happens to us, but from how we act.
So it's less about what life throws at you and more about how you handle it.
You nailed it. It's about focusing on what you can control, your thoughts and actions, and letting go of what you can't.
It's about mastering your inner world so you can handle the outer world better.
That's the idea. It's like a mental training program for life.
And Marcus Aurelius, through Meditations, is our coach in this training program.
That's a fantastic way to put it. So, are you ready to learn from the master?
I'm all in.
Oh.
Let's dive into Meditations. What did Marcus Aurelius actually write about in this journal?
Well, he covered a lot of ground. Managing anger, finding meaning, facing death, coming to terms with the fact that everything changes, you name it. He probably pondered it.
So it wasn't just lofty philosophical ideas. He was connecting these ideas to his actual life.
Absolutely. That's what makes meditation so relatable. Here's this emperor dealing with the same emotions and challenges we all face.
Can you give us an example of how he brought this philosophy to life in his journal?
Sure. One entry that always hits me is where he's reflecting on a trip he took, looking at the ruins of these once great cities.
Okay, I can picture that. An emperor surveying the remnants of past empires.
Exactly. And he writes, "Towns which flourished once upon a time and now lie fallen and in ruins before our eyes. And I said to myself, alas, and will you, Servius, not restrain your grief and recall that you were born immortal? Believe me, the thought was no small consolation to me."
Wow, that's really powerful. Even an emperor standing amidst fallen empires is reminded that he's not invincible.
It's a humbling thought, right? And it gets to the heart of Stoicism, accepting what's beyond our control, including our own mortality.
It's like he's saying, look, everything fades eventually, even empires, even us. But that's not a reason to despair. It's a reason to appreciate what we have right now.
Exactly. And that's such a valuable lesson, especially today when we're constantly told to strive for more, to never be satisfied. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that true contentment comes from accepting the present moment, imperfections and all, and finding beauty in the fact that nothing lasts forever.
That's a perspective we could all use a little more of. We've been talking about acceptance a lot. What about action?
That's where the idea of virtue comes in. For Stoics, virtue wasn't just about being good. It was about living a life guided by reason, reaching your full potential, and using your talents to contribute to the well-being of others.
So it's not just about accepting everything that comes your way. It's about being proactive, striving to be your best self.
Exactly. And for Marcus Aurelius, being emperor meant ruling justly, protecting his people, using his position for good.
It's fascinating how his personal beliefs seem to have influenced his leadership. But did he ever struggle to balance being emperor with being a Stoic?
Oh, absolutely. Meditations shows us Marcus wrestling with the allure of power, the burden of responsibility, the tough decisions he had to make. He constantly reminded himself to stay grounded, not let his position inflate his ego.
That's so relatable. We all struggle to stay true to our values when things get tough.
Exactly. And that's what makes meditation so powerful. It's not some rigid set of rules, but one man's journey to live a virtuous life with all its ups and downs.
It's a journey we're all on in some way, right? Trying to figure out how to live a good life.
You got it. And Marcus Aurelius, through his honest reflections, becomes a companion on that journey.
Well, I'm definitely enjoying having him as a guide. But before we go any further, let's step back for a moment and talk about ancient Rome. What was life like back then?
Oh man, ancient Rome was a wild ride. Imagine a melting pot of cultures, ideas, beliefs. It was vibrant.
So, kind of like today's world in a way.
In some ways, yes. But it was also a time of constant upheaval, with wars, political intrigue, social unrest. And even with all his privilege, Marcus Aurelius wasn't immune to these challenges.
He was still facing the same anxieties we face today.
Absolutely. The fragility of life, the fickleness of fortune. It was a constant reality for everyone, emperor or not. And that's what makes meditation so timeless. It speaks to our shared human experience.
So we're not just reading about some distant historical figure, we're seeing ourselves reflected in his struggles.
Exactly. We're all in this together, trying to make sense of life and find our way. And Marcus Aurelius, through his honest reflections, reminds us that we're not alone in that journey.
I like that. It's a reminder that even emperors had their doubts and fears.
Oh, absolutely. He wasn't some perfect Stoic superhero. He was a human being, just like us.
Well, on that note, I'm really curious to delve deeper into these human moments in meditations.
Me too. Let's explore more of those personal reflections and see what other insights we can uncover.
Let's do it. I'm ready for more wisdom from the ancient world.
All right, let's jump back into meditations. One of the things that really stands out to me is how intimate it feels. It wasn't written for publication, you know?
So it's like we're peeking into his personal diary.
Exactly. Like we're right there with him as he grapples with his thoughts and emotions.
Okay, give us a taste of this intimacy. What kind of personal stuff did he write about?
He covered it all, from dealing with anger and finding meaning in life to reflecting on death and the ephemeral nature of things.
So a real mix of deep thoughts and everyday concerns.
Exactly. It's like a tapestry of philosophical musings, personal anecdotes, and even poetic observations of nature.
He was a pretty insightful guy, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. And he wasn't just theorizing. He was actively connecting these ideas to his lived experiences.
Can you share a specific passage that captures this personal touch?
Sure. In one entry, he reflects on how quickly everything passes, even grand things like empires and reputations. He writes, "Think of substance in its entirety, of which you have the smallest of shares, and of time in its entirety, of which a brief and momentary portion has been allotted to you, and of the works of fate, and how very small is your part in them."
Wow, that puts things in perspective, doesn't it? It's so easy to get wrapped up in our own little worlds and forget that we're part of something so much bigger.
Exactly. And he's not trying to make us feel insignificant. He's reminding us that our time is limited and that we should use it wisely by focusing on what truly matters, virtue, wisdom, and contributing to the common good.
It's like he's saying, don't waste your precious time on the trivial. Make each day count.
You got it. And that's a message that's just as relevant today as it was in ancient Rome. We live in a world that's full of distractions, but Marcus Aurelius reminds us to keep our priorities straight and focus on what brings true meaning and fulfillment.
That's a good reminder for all of us, I think. But I have a question. We've been talking about Marcus Aurelius as this wise and virtuous leader. But history can be messy, right? Were there any contradictions between his philosophy and the realities of ruling an empire?
That's a sharp observation. And it's important to remember that Marcus Aurelius lived in a very different time, with different values and norms.
So even though he championed justice and compassion, things weren't always so black and white.
Exactly. While his writings express these high ideals, his actions as emperor sometimes fell short of those ideals.
Can you give us an example?
One area where this tension is evident is in his treatment of Christians.
Christianity was a new and controversial religion back then, right?
Exactly. It was seen as a threat to traditional Roman beliefs and authority. And while there's debate about how much he personally directed it, persecutions of Christians did occur during his reign.
So even a so-called philosopher-king like Marcus Aurelius wasn't immune to the complexities of power.
You got it. And I think that's a valuable lesson for us today. It reminds us that even those we admire, even those who strive for wisdom and virtue, are still products of their time.
It's a reminder that history, and life itself, is rarely simple or straightforward.
You're absolutely right. And that's one of the things that makes Marcus Aurelius and Meditations so fascinating.
It's not just about praising him as a perfect Stoic sage. It's about understanding him as a complex human being who is trying to navigate a complicated world.
Exactly. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes. He struggled. But he kept striving, kept reflecting, and kept growing. And that's what makes his story so inspiring.
Well said. I'm really enjoying this exploration of his life and philosophy.
Me too. And there's so much to learn from Marcus Aurelius and Meditations.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, but I feel like we've only scratched the surface.
You're right. We've laid the foundation, but there's so much more to explore.
All right, let's take a quick break to gather our thoughts, and then we'll dive back into the depths of Stoic wisdom.
Sounds like a plan. I'm ready to go deeper.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Meditations. Last time we met Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, and got a feel for the turbulent world he lived in. Now let's really dig into how his philosophy plays out in his journal.
I'm ready for more. What kind of insights can we glean from his reflections?
One thing that jumps out is how Marcus used meditations to coach himself. It's almost like a personal trainer for the mind.
Oh, interesting. So it wasn't just a diary, but a tool for self-improvement.
Exactly. He's constantly reminding himself of Stoic principles and using them to reframe his thinking and tackle challenges.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. He's always emphasizing focusing on what's in our control. When faced with a seemingly impossible obstacle, he'd write things like, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength."
That's powerful, especially when we feel overwhelmed by things we can't change. It's easy to feel helpless.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of Stoicism. It's not about ignoring difficulties, but about approaching them with a clear head. This control thing is really fascinating. Can you give us another example of how Marcus applied this to his life as emperor?
Well, imagine the pressure he was under, constantly bombarded with requests, demands, criticisms.
Yeah, running an empire, everyone wants something.
Right. But Marcus used Stoic principles to filter out the noise. He'd remind himself that it's impossible to please everyone and that his real duty was to act justly, regardless of what people thought.
So instead of reacting defensively or getting caught up in the drama, he'd step back and make decisions based on reason and virtue.
Exactly. He understood that true leadership isn't about popularity contests, but about doing what's right, even when it's tough.
It's like he's saying, don't let the haters get you down. Stay focused on your purpose.
That's a great modern take on it. And that's what's so amazing about Meditations. It transcends time and place. It's wisdom that still applies today.
All right, you've convinced me. Marcus Aurelius is the original life coach. But something else I noticed in Meditations was how often he mentions nature. How does that tie into Stoicism?
That's a great observation. For the Stoics, nature was a model of order and rationality. Remember the logos, that universal reason we talked about. They believed the universe operated according to this grand plan and that humans should try to live in harmony with it.
So it's about aligning yourself with the natural flow of things rather than fighting against it.
You got it. Observing nature taught them about acceptance, about how everything changes, about how we're all interconnected.
Did Marcus ever use nature imagery in his writing?
Oh, all the time. He'd use things like a flowing river or the changing seasons to make his philosophical points.
Can you give us an example?
In one entry, he writes, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." It's like he's saying, just as nature has its seasons and cycles, so too do our lives.
So we should embrace the natural flow of life, the ups and downs, the connections we make.
Exactly. It's about accepting what is and finding joy in the journey.
That's a powerful thought. It's so easy to get caught up in resisting change or wishing things were different.
It is. But Marcus reminds us to focus on what we can control, which is our attitude and our actions.
This is giving me a lot to think about. We've been focusing on Marcus Aurelius' personal life and how he applied Stoicism. But he was also an emperor, leading a vast empire. Did his Stoic beliefs influence his leadership style?
Absolutely. Stoicism provided him with a framework for decision-making, managing responsibilities, and dealing with power. He saw his role as emperor not as a privilege, but as a duty to serve the common good.
So it wasn't about personal gain or glory, but about using his power for the benefit of others.
Precisely. He believed that true leadership was rooted in justice, wisdom, and compassion. There's a great quote from Meditations where he writes, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be one."
He's basically saying, walk the walk, don't just talk the talk.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message for any leader, whether you're running an empire or a small business. It's about embodying the values you believe in and leading by example.
So Stoicism wasn't just a personal philosophy for him, but a leadership philosophy too.
You could say that. It gave him a way to make tough decisions, to stay grounded amidst the temptations of power, and to use his position for something bigger than himself.
It's amazing how these ancient ideas can still be relevant to modern leadership. But I do have a question. Did his Stoic beliefs ever clash with the realities of ruling an empire? I mean, sometimes you have to make tough calls that might not perfectly align with your ideals.
That's a great question, and it's something we'll explore more as we go deeper into Meditations. Marcus Aurelius had to make a lot of difficult decisions during his reign, and his Stoic principles were definitely put to the test by the complexities of politics, war, and social unrest.
I can imagine. It's one thing to talk about Stoicism in theory, but it's another to actually live it out when you're facing real-world challenges.
Exactly, and that's what makes Marcus Aurelius' story so compelling. He wasn't a perfect Stoic, living in some ivory tower. He was a human being, grappling with these ideas, trying to apply them to a world that wasn't always ideal.
Okay, so we're about to get into the nitty-gritty of how Stoicism played out in the real world. But before we do, something's been on my mind. We've been talking about Stoicism as this philosophy of reason, control, and acceptance. But where do emotions fit in? Doesn't Stoicism risk making us too detached, too unemotional?
That's a great question and a common misunderstanding about Stoicism. Stoics weren't advocating for a life without emotions. They understood that emotions are part of being human, but they did believe we shouldn't be ruled by our emotions.
So it's not about suppressing emotions, but about managing them.
Exactly. It's about understanding your emotions, choosing how you react to them, and not letting them control your actions. Marcus Aurelius talks about this in Meditations, comparing managing emotions to being a skilled charioteer, guiding the horses rather than letting them run wild.
So it's about striking a balance between reason and emotion.
You got it. That's a challenge we all face, whether we follow Stoicism or not. Finding that sweet spot where we can experience our emotions without letting them run the show.
It's about having emotional intelligence, right?
Exactly, and that's something Marcus Aurelius embodied. He was known for being composed, calm, and level-headed, even in tough situations. But that didn't mean he was emotionless. He loved his family, grieved their losses, and felt the weight of his responsibilities.
So he found a way to be both stoic and human.
Precisely, and that's what makes him such a compelling figure. He wasn't some perfect, detached sage. He was a real person, wrestling with real-world problems, trying to live up to his ideals while acknowledging his own human flaws.
It's a good reminder that wisdom and virtue aren't about being perfect, but about striving to be our best selves, even when we mess up.
You're so right, and that's such an important message today when we're constantly bombarded with images of perfection. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that it's okay to be imperfect, to make mistakes, to struggle. What matters is that we keep trying, keep learning, keep growing.
That takes the pressure off, doesn't it? It's not about being perfect, it's about the journey.
Exactly, and that journey, as Marcus Aurelius shows us, can be incredibly rewarding.
Well, I'm feeling pretty inspired to keep exploring Meditations. What else can we learn from his reflections?
One of the things that really stands out is his emphasis on living in the present moment. He understood that dwelling on the past or worrying about the future robs us of the joy and peace available to us right now.
So, like the saying goes, don't sweat the small stuff.
Exactly. He knew that we only have control over this present moment, so that's where our focus should be. He writes, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Therefore, guard accordingly and take care that you entertain no notions unsuitable to virtue and reasonable nature."
So he's saying we should be mindful of our thoughts, choose thoughts that are in line with virtue and reason.
Precisely. He understood that our thoughts shape our reality. By cultivating positive and constructive thoughts, we can create a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
This makes me think about how much mental energy I waste worrying about things I can't control.
That's a common struggle. But Marcus reminds us that we have the power to choose our thoughts. We can choose to focus on the good, to appreciate the present moment, to cultivate gratitude.
It sounds like a recipe for a happier life.
Mm.
But how do we actually do that? How do we train our minds to focus on the present when we're so used to dwelling on the past or worrying about the future?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll dig into as we continue our deep dive. Marcus Aurelius offers a lot of practical techniques for cultivating mindfulness and presence. One of his favorites was simply to observe the world around him with curiosity, noticing the beauty in even the smallest things.
So it's about training yourself to appreciate the little things, those everyday moments we often take for granted.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective, focusing on what we have instead of what we lack, and finding joy in the simplicity of the present moment.
I can see how that would be a powerful antidote to stress and anxiety.
You're right. And that's what makes Marcus Aurelius's wisdom so enduring. He offers us a path to inner peace and fulfillment, a way to deal with life's challenges with grace, wisdom, and a deep appreciation for the present moment.
I'm definitely feeling inspired. I'm ready to keep exploring and see what other gems of wisdom we can uncover in meditations.
Me too. There's so much more to discover, and I can't wait to share it with you and our listener.
Okay, before we get carried away, I want to touch on something that might be on our listeners' minds. We've talked about the benefits of Stoicism, how it can help us deal with challenges and find peace. But is there a downside? Does Stoicism ever go too far?
That's a great question. It's true that any philosophy taken to an extreme can have its drawbacks. One potential criticism of Stoicism is that it can lead to suppressing emotions. While Stoics emphasize controlling destructive emotions like anger and fear, it's important to remember that all emotions have a purpose.
So it's about finding that balance again, right? Not denying our emotions, but understanding them and choosing how we react.
Exactly. It's about using reason to guide our emotions, not letting emotions rule us. And it's about remembering that even so-called negative emotions can teach us important things about ourselves and the world.
That makes a lot of sense. Stoicism is like any tool that can be used for good or bad, depending on the user.
You hit the nail on the head. We should approach any philosophy, any belief system, with a critical and discerning mind. Take what's helpful, leave what's not, and always try to apply these ideas in a way that promotes well-being for ourselves and others.
It sounds like we're talking about finding a balance between wisdom and compassion, between reason and empathy.
You got it. And I think that's a key takeaway from Marcus Aurelius and Meditations. He wasn't just some philosopher preaching abstract ideas. He was a man striving to live a virtuous life. A life that was both thoughtful and compassionate, grounded in reason, but also open to the complexity of being human.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it makes me even more eager to continue our deep dive.
Me too. There's so much more to explore, and I can't wait to see what other insights we uncover together.
Welcome back to our deep dive into meditations. We've journeyed through the life of Marcus Aurelius, explored Stoicism, and uncovered some real gems of wisdom from his personal journal.
We've seen how he used Stoic principles to navigate leadership, manage emotions, and find peace in the middle of chaos. But like any good deep dive, we're left with some big questions.
Right. Like, how do we actually apply this ancient wisdom to our modern lives? What can our listeners take away from all this?
Well, if we step back and look at the big picture, Meditations gives us a framework for living a more fulfilling life. It's not about becoming a Stoic philosopher or living like a Roman emperor.
So we don't have to wear togas and conquer Gaul.
No togas or conquests required. It's about taking those core principles, focusing on what we can control, choosing virtue, accepting what we can't change, and applying them to our own lives.
So it's like taking these ancient tools and building our own modern toolkit for handling life's challenges.
Exactly. For example, Marcus Aurelius' reflections on death, even though they were written centuries ago, can help us face our own mortality with more courage and acceptance.
Death is a tough topic for a lot of people.
It is, but he reminds us that death is a natural part of life, and by accepting that truth, we can actually live more fully in the present moment.
It's like he's saying, don't waste your precious time fearing the inevitable. Focus on living a life that matters.
You've got it. And that message resonates across time and cultures. It's a reminder to savor each day, appreciate the beauty around us, and make choices that align with our values and purpose.
Okay, so we've got this framework, this toolkit for life, but one question keeps popping up for me. Did Marcus Aurelius, with all his wisdom and power, actually achieve the inner peace he was searching for?
That's the million-dollar question. And I think the answer lies in the very nature of meditations. It's not a victory speech, but an ongoing conversation, a continuous process of self-reflection and growth.
So even the philosopher-king was a work in progress.
Absolutely, and I think that's incredibly comforting. It reminds us that the pursuit of wisdom and virtue is a journey, not a destination.
We're all going to stumble and make mistakes along the way.
We will, but what matters is that we keep striving, keep learning, and keep growing.
It's like he's saying, don't beat yourself up. We're all in this together. Just keep practicing and moving forward.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's a message of hope and encouragement. It reminds us that even with all life's challenges and uncertainties, there's always room for growth, for progress, for becoming a little bit wiser and kinder each day.
Well, I'm definitely feeling inspired after this deep dive. Meditations has given us not just philosophical insights, but practical guidance for navigating the complexities of life.
Me too. It reminds us that the wisdom of the ancients is still relevant today. It offers us timeless tools for cultivating peace, finding meaning, and living a life that truly reflects our best selves.
And on that note, we want to thank you, our listener, for joining us on this exploration. We hope you found something in our deep dive into meditations that resonates with you, something that sparks your own journey of self-discovery and growth.
Remember, the pursuit of wisdom is a lifelong adventure. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep reflecting, and keep diving deep.
We hope you're leaving with fresh insights and a spark of inspiration. Remember to subscribe, leave a review, and check back for more episodes as we dive into new worlds of thought, one book at a time. Until then, keep your mind set in stone and your curiosity open. This has been a Big L Riz Media podcast, where big ideas meet lasting impressions.